Chodhanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. So before we start the class, we read a little bit from the biography of the founder of ISKCON International Society for Krishna Consciousness, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, called Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, which means nectar of the pastimes or nectarian pastimes. Srila Prabhupada is volume 6, which is the last volume. And this is not so long ago. Sorry, this is in 1977, just a few months before he departed this world. And the chapter is entitled, I Have Done My Part. The Julan Yatra pilgrims were mostly villagers. Many were from Rajasthan, the men and women wearing bright colored clothes, and the women wearing heavy gold and silver bangles and bracelets, which clanked as they walked barefoot on the roads. The numbers of mendicant sadhus also increased, and they became a common sight, with their ash or clay covered bodies marked with brightly colored tilak. The Yamuna had, so this is in Vrindavan, in Krishna's birthplace, where Prabhupada stayed last few months before his departure, although he did went to UK for a month or a few weeks. Yeah, the Yamuna had flooded in many places and was too swift for bathing or swimming. Thousands of visitors came to the Krishna Balaram Mandir, which was now one of the most popular temples in all of northern India. The evening arati at Krishna Balaram was so crowded that resident devotees couldn't attend, but could only stand in the back of the courtyard at the edge of packed, jostling crowd. Some of the Gurukula boys would greet the guests with Hindi back to Gadget magazines, each boy selling 200 or 300 magazines a night. Srila Prabhupada was glad to hear this. His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Before the class, we'll do invocation, which is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which is offering respect to all pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's like invoking presence of the Lord and asking for His blessing so we can receive transcendental sound vibration in the form of teachings. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo is short for Namaste, offering respect. Bhagavate means one who possesses unlimited six opulences, and Vasudevaya has got few meanings. One is all-pervading, another meaning is one who has got pure heart. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, which means Srimad Bhagavatam means beautiful pastimes of the Supreme Lord in one translation anyway. It's written actually 5,000 years ago by Srila Vyasadeva, so great sage, which is considered incarnation of Krishna, who came and written unbelievable amount of literature, millions and millions of verses describing the nature of this world and the nature of the soul and the Supreme Lord, and how to transcend this world and how to awaken relationship with the Supreme Lord. So this is Canto 5, Chapter 17, text number 10 and 11. So I'll do text 10 myself, and then 11 you can do together. Anye chanada nandyascha varshe varshe santi bahusho mirvadigiri duhitara shatasha. Translation: many other rivers both big and small, flow from the top of Mount Meru. These rivers are like daughters of the mountain, and they flow to the various tracts of land in hundreds of branches. Actually, text 11 is also what is considered prose, so I do that myself as well. Tatrapi bharatameva varsham karma kshetram ananyi ashtavarshani svarginam punya shisho pabogastanani baumani svargapadani yapadishanti. So we recite Sanskrit because it's a very powerful language, and when the language is used to glorify the Supreme Lord, then it has this very empowering, purifying potency. So by reciting it, it also purifies our hearts. So we'll do word for word together. Tatra api, out of all of them. Bharatam, known as Bharatvarsha. Eva, certainly. Varsham, the tract of land. Karma kshetram, the field of activities. Anyani, the others. Ashtavarshani, 8 tracts of land. Svarginam, of the living entities elevated to the heavenly planets by extraordinary pious activities. Punya, of the results of pious activities. Shesha, of the remainder. Upabhoga stanani, the places for material enjoyment. Bhaumani Svarga Padani, as the heavenly places on earth. Vyapadishanti, they designate. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Among the 9 Varshas, the tract of land known as Bharatvarsha is understood to be the field of fruitive activities. Learned scholars and saintly persons declare the other 8 Varshas to be meant for very highly elevated, pious persons. After returning from the heavenly planets, they enjoy the remaining results of their pious activities in these 8 earthly Varshas. Yeah, Varsha means land, isn't it? Something like that. Land or region. Purport. The heavenly places of enjoyment are divided into 3 groups: the celestial heavenly planets, the heavenly planets on earth, and the Bila heavenly places, which are found in lower regions. Among these 3 classes of heavenly places, Bhauma Svarga Padani, the heavenly places on earth, are the 8 Varshas other than Bharatvarsha. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Kshine Punya Martya Lokam Vishanti. When the persons living in the heavenly planets exhaust the results of their pious activities, they return to this earth. In this way, they are elevated to the heavenly planets, and then they again fall to the earthly planets. This process is known as Brahmanda Brahmana, wandering up and down throughout the universes. Those who are intelligent, in other words, those who have not lost their intelligence, do not involve themselves in this process of wandering up and down. They take to devotional service of the Lord so that they can ultimately penetrate the covering of this universe and enter the spiritual kingdom. Then they are situated on one of the planets known as Vaikuntha Loka, or still higher, Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan. A devotee is never caught in the process of being promoted to the heavenly planets and again coming down. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Ei Rupe Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakta Lata Bija. Among all the living entities wandering throughout the universe, one who is most fortunate comes in contact with a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus gets the opportunity to execute devotional service. Those who are sincerely seeking the favor of Krishna come in contact with a guru, a bona fide representative of Krishna. The Mayavadis indulging in mental speculation and the karmis desiring the results of their actions cannot become gurus. A guru must be a direct representative of Krishna who distributes the instructions of Krishna without any change. Thus, only the most fortunate persons come in contact with the guru. As confirmed in the Vedic literature, Stad Vijnanartam Sagurum Evabi Gachet. One has to search out a guru to understand the affairs of the spiritual world. Srimad Bhagavatam also confirms this point. Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam. One who is very interested in understanding the activities in the spiritual world must search out a guru, a bona fide representative of Krishna. From all angles of vision, therefore, the word guru is especially meant for the bona fide representative of Krishna and no one else. Padma Purana states, a Vaishnava Gurur Nasiyat. One who is not a Vaishnava or who is not a representative of Krishna cannot be a guru. Even the most qualified Brahmana cannot become a guru if he is not a representative of Krishna. Brahmanas are supposed to acquire 6 kinds of auspicious qualifications. They become very learned scholars, patana, and very qualified teachers, patana. They become expert in worshipping the Lord or the demigods, yajana, and they teach others how to execute this worship, yajana. They qualify themselves as bona fide persons to receive alms from others, prati graha, and they distribute the wealth in charity, dana. Yet, even a Brahmana possessing these qualifications cannot become a guru unless he is the representative of Krishna. Guru Nasiyat. Vaishnava Shvapacho Guru. But a Vaishnava, a bona fide representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, can become a guru even if he is Shvapacha, a member of a family of dog eaters. Of the 3 divisions of heavenly planets, Svargaloka, Bhaumasvarga, is sometimes accepted as the tract of land in Bharatvarsha known as Kashmir. In this region, there are certainly good facilities for material and sense enjoyment, but this is not the business of a pure transcendentalist. Rupa Goswami describes the engagement of a pure transcendentalist as follows. Anyabilashata shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishnano shilanam bhaktir uttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. Those who fully engage in devotional service to Krishna just to please him are not interested in the 3 divisions of heavenly places, namely Divya Swarga, Bhoma Swarga, and Bila Swarga. Om Adhyanathmirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Yati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Vijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shirada Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Yutamshcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So the translation again. Among the 9 Varshas, the tract of land known as Bharatvarsha is understood to be the field of fruitive activities. Learned scholars and saintly persons declare the other 8 Varshas to be meant for very highly elevated pious persons. After returning from the heavenly planets, they enjoy remaining results of their pious activities in these 8 earthly Varshas. So entire universe is actually an arrangement to facilitate different levels of consciousness and desires of living entity. Just like the sound is on. And this there is like a 3 regions that the universe is divided according to the Vedic literature. One is called the heavenly region, another is earthly region, and lower regions. So we are situated in the earthly region of the universe, and specifically this planet is called also Bharat Varsha in Sanskrit. It's very, very interesting, very, very special, and in fact we are very fortunate to be here because it's considered a field of activities. From this very place, it's opportunity for us to either uplift our consciousness or degrade our consciousness, or uplift our desires or degrade our desires. And according to that level of consciousness, then in the next life we are placed in a respective situation in the universe to reciprocate with that level of our consciousness. So one is uh, very pious, very good person, doing lots of good to others, helping elderly, feeding people, doing various types of charitable work, etc. Then one's destination becomes heavenly regions. There is a reward for being a very good person. And of course, we spoke about this before, but just to recap, that even in this world, sometimes it can be a bit challenging to expand your mind to include this whole universe, because the only thing that we can see, in terms of population, is this Earth, planet Earth. And so to expand our consciousness and think, okay, there is a heavenly region, there is an earthly region, and there's a lower region, that can be a little bit of a challenge. But if you just think about this one Earth, you can see that there is some heavenly regions on this very Earth planet. Some places that got this very, very heavenly weather, blue sky, and blue sea, and palms and figs, and etc. And some places they seem to be a little bit more gloomy, or like extremely cold, freezing, and etc. Of course, I'm not necessarily referring to Scotland. Or it could be, you can say like Antarctica or something, it's freezing, icy, and etc. Still, human beings are populating there as well. And for half a year, it's dark. and for half a year is light. And even, parts of one country, if you look in the country, there are some regions that are considered nice, and people aspire to live there, like a wealthy people like to go there. And there is some other parts of the country that, are less fortunate, and, like a more poor people go there. And also there is also in the city or village, they seem to be as well. There's a parts where, is one kind of level of existence, and another parts where is a different level, at least externally, on material platform. We're not speaking just yet about internal consciousness and disposition, but like externally, on a physical level, there seem to be like a more comfortable living in some parts, and some people seem to be living a more comfortable life, and some other people seem to be living a less comfortable life. So how is it? Is it some sort of, and some people then even doubt, existence of God. How is it that some people seem to be more fortunate, and materially, and some people seem to be less fortunate materially. Some people seem to be born with a spoon in their mouth. And of course, it's not so much nowadays. You see a golden spoons or silver spoons. But there's this English saying, I think, being born with a spoon in the mouth, kind of indicating that, this person, it doesn't have to struggle too much for the existence. And some people seem to be like struggling like anything just to barely survive, especially in some parts of the world or some parts of the country, some parts of the city. So they seem to be. So what is it? Is it like, is the God so unfair that he puts somebody into this seem to be better situation, and some people seem to be struggling more, and etc. How is that? Is there some sort of discrimination, if because we all striving for equality, etc. So is the God is it not being equal to everyone? How is it that there seem to be like differences? And this is facilitated not directly by God. He created a law of action and reaction, and therefore, according to our activities in our past lives, is an extremely complicated law, of course, very very complicated, but in a very very basic sense, that action and reaction is there. We are placed in a certain types of situations according to our activities in our past lives or in many past lives, and it's an extremely complicated law. There is one description just to show how it is complicated and not like a very linear. There is one pastime in a scripture given how a hunter, when hunting, was quite cruel person, and he found a nest with 100 birds. The mother bird was away, and he kind of mercilessly killed those 100 birds. So many, so he killed, and then the mother bird came back and was so distressed and so unhappy. So that created a certain karmic reaction. But somehow or another, this hunter didn't live a human form of life. But many birds later didn't get the reaction for killing these 100 birds immediately. It's described in that specific pastime that many birds later, that person had 100 sons. So in order to have 100 sons, you actually, it's not also, this doesn't fall from the sky, but you need to also perform on various types of activities, and even, be pious, etc., in order to get 100 sons. So only in that life, when this person Dhritarashtra had 100 sons, those 100 sons died in a war. So it took many births to get a reaction until this person built up sufficient piety to have 100 offsprings, and then they all died, and he experienced the pain that this bird experienced by losing 100 um, birds that were offsprings of that bird. So just a small illustration of how complex is a law of karma. We're going through something in life. We don't know. It may not be, this life. It could be many lives before that we may be going through this suffering. So, of course, this law of karma is not to be meant to judge other people. It's meant to analyze our own situation. So when we see suffering, when we see people placed in a different situations, we do not apply our understanding of karma on those people, but we apply compassion that somehow another person is going through whatever they're going in life. But is there something I can do to help a person? And we'll come back a little bit later because there are different types of help on a physical level, on emotional level, and on a spiritual level. So there are these different types of placements, and then we apply the law of karma in its full understanding. So to others we apply it by showing compassion, and we don't judge people and saying, you just deserve this. Shishikodanitaya Maya Purushashi Ki Jai. This is very cruel and inappropriate way of using a understanding of karma to judge other people, but actually we have to use compassion. However, we use law of karma in our own life, our deep understanding of law of karma in our own life, by taking responsibility of what is happening in our life. We don't blame the government, we don't blame the partner, we don't blame our parents. And of course, it's a very advanced level. Of course, I would say more we are shifting, we are moving towards that understanding, because just suddenly take a full responsibility for everything. Very few people can do that actually. Just suddenly shift the entire weight of responsibility can be even very overwhelming. But we are moving of taking more responsibility and reducing, putting responsibility of everybody on everyone else. But we don't do that to other people again. We are actually then to other people, we try to help them, and we don't blame them. This is all your fault because you're suffering. It's a very subtle point, and it's so a person with elevated consciousness just won't just blame everybody else if they're suffering, but is gonna take or she responsibility for its own suffering and try to adjust one consciousness. One will understand then that whatever suffering I'm going through is because of what I did in many lives before, and I'm suffering consequences of that activity, and therefore I want to change my consciousness in order to become elevated. So I would not even say free from reaction. But the problem, some people then just say, okay, you just don't be then bad anymore. The suffering is causing you misery, so I have to do good things. But what happens, as we spoke, that even in this world we see how there is a various types of external and internal facilities for enjoying or suffering, in some sort of heavenly enjoyments and some suffering, but also that exists across the universe as well. You may be so good and such a good person that the enjoyment of this world is not anymore sufficient to facilitate your consciousness and your magnanimity and your kindness and etc., that you go up. And the same with suffering as well. You may do certain activities and you can see it happens, certain things, that you see in this world is phenomenally, like even cruel and disappointing and distressing. So sometimes the reaction for that kind of activity is no more possible to facilitate in this earthly plane, that there is a lower regions where that suffering, one gets the suffering and as a reaction to one's activities. So the problem with this going down or going up, a very, very good person, you go to enjoy very, very nicely heavenly situations for being extremely good and pious and good person. But the problem is that with the going to heavenly regions is that when you exhaust your piety, you come back again to this earthly realm. You kind of back to square one. And sometimes you can see it even happens for people who seem to be like a very materially successful. They go through life, very seem to be, as we said, with a spoon in their mouth. But there are occasions when that piety gets exhausted and they go through a lot of suffering too. And a lot of actually now very wealthy and rich people even admit, because it has become now a more common to be honest. Actually more people are becoming a little bit more honest and vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm actually going through difficult time, instead of putting this, smile on a social media that everything is fine, I'm doing, everything is good. So as more people are admitting, actually, I am going through a difficult time, and being like a more honest and vulnerable. And actually a lot of people appreciate that kind of effort, that honesty. And some of the very successful materially people are also has admitted, instead of like a basking in their fame and wealth and looking that everything is fantastic, and then you hear some of them even commit a suicide and etc. So then you realize, my God, it seems to be very materially successful. Why this person is not happy? So these things happen, like this. For example, there was this comedian who was like making everybody laugh like anything, year after year after year. He suffered from very bad depression, and committed suicide. So some of those people actually start to, be honest and say, to be honest, I'm not happy. And I'm on the top of the world. I have everything. Like actually, recently I listened interview about Will Smith, and he was like systematically he planned his success from A to Z, and he was super ultra and reached his ultimate success. And he was coming back home, and everything was like a military to achieve success. It's kind of honestly admit it was absolutely military, this whole situation, how he achieved, and he had everything. And then, but his relationships with the family, they were miserable. And he was like, a few times he actually break through shouting, like, you got everything. Why you are not happy? Why you're not happy? You got absolutely everything. You're the most successful people, in the world practically. Why you are not happy? So some of those people will admit, and it's actually good for us as well, because it can be very attractive and looks like a very glittering life. Oh, I would like to be like this. It seems to be wonderful. They admitted, it was miserable existence at the top of the success, at the very top of material like success, and receiving, like, I don't know if he received any Oscars. He probably did. At that very top of his existence, the whole family was miserable. And So this is the situation, and so even if you go to heaven, you can get exhausted your piety and you come back, and here in material world we also see that this happens. You go to the success, then you can go back down, and sometimes you go back up and down. And also, of course, so that can be a little bit distressing, that reality. But it looks a little bit more positive that if you think, okay, I went down in the lower regions and after I suffered, I'm back to this earthly realm. So that's a bit more encouraging, that because sometimes you hear in some traditions that you go and suffer forever, never to come back. So that's very, very depressing actually. But no, the reality is that after we exhausted our suffering, we come back to this earthly realm for another chance. But it's just a question, when you're gonna get fed up, like, with this up and down program, going up and going down, going up and going down, birth after birth after birth after birth. It's actually, and this is world intelligence is used. Intelligent person should come to the point, I'm actually don't want to carry on with this up and down program. In one life I'm suffering, another life I'm enjoying, or even in this life, like in this age as well that we're going through, it's not so linear. In the previous ages is more like, if you have a life of piety, that means you live a life of enjoyment for almost all your life, and then you almost like depart, in some auspicious circumstances with maybe not so much suffering. Of course, that is a lot of suffering involved as well, or death of physical body. But I lost a little bit of a point. What I was saying. Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
regarding the beings going up and down.
Yes. Yeah.
Higher beings, I want to, they know everything. They know how to help a person, a being who is down. And if so, how did they know that? Through experience, or it's just being there? They have access to all knowledge, and they can help other beings in a lower level.
So that's a very good question. So often we think that being higher means to have some sort of material wealth or material better situation, etc. So what we've been speaking about until this point is about materially better situation in terms of how much enjoyment you can get, material facility, and material type of happiness, and etc. But that is not considered elevated consciousness from the spiritual point of view. So, and this is in a purport we spoke about spiritual teacher or spiritual master. So, when one gets fed up with this going up and down program, then one may start inquiring, what is this world all about? It seems to be some people are up, some people are down. I am sometimes up, sometimes down. And it doesn't seem to be end. There's a certain kind of inquisitiveness awakens, or frustration, or even a search for some absolute truth awakens in our heart. So this is the seed of spiritual life. And the spiritual life starts when you start wondering, what is all going on here. So if one is fortunate enough, and is described in this verse, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagavan Jiv Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beach, the spirit soul, the living entity, is wandering up and down in the universe, being placed according to one's karma in different directions. But one is fortunate enough, one meets a spiritual master or spiritual teacher. So spiritual teacher, or genuine spiritual teacher, because we go so much in the purport as well, what is a true teacher and what is not. The true spiritual teacher is one who has transcended this material existence is not anymore in a cycle of birth and death, but one who has become liberated from that cycle of death, or one may be on the way. So, like if somebody can be ahead of us in their path, in spiritual path, they can share with us realizations. They can share with us teachings. So that is considered elevated consciousness. Is not a material facility or materially elevated, because one life you get it and another life you lose it. But what is happening is that that what the real thing is to elevation of consciousness and purification of one's existence. John Prabhu, just to let you know that actually today Simona and Katarina will cover the cleaning services. Sorry, I forgot to mention yesterday. So is a purification of one's existence, and a spiritual master is God understanding what is going on beyond this material universe, what is going on in the spiritual world. Spiritual master has got a relationship with Krishna. And of course, in the purport we speak about Krishna. Krishna is also, because these teachings are non-sectarian, so when we speak about other religions and we speak about different names of God, Jehovah, Allah, etc., this is all refers to the same Krishna. So when we speak about Krishna, we are not speaking about exclusively, this is our God called Krishna. When we speak about Krishna, like, in Lithuania, sun is God Saule. In German, the sun is called Sonne. So it's a different word, but it refers to the same sun. So when we speak Krishna, Jehovah, etc., there's so many names for God, Supreme Being. It refers to the same, but we like to call Supreme Lord Krishna because we feel it's very, very beautiful name. Krishna means all attractive. We feel it's a very, very nicely, wonderfully describes the Lord in his full capacity. We have a bee flying around. So we love this name Krishna. So spiritual master is one who changed the destination, is no more up and down the material universe, but destination is spiritual world. And the spiritual master can be one who actually descended even from the spiritual world to elevate us and uplift us. And since time immemorial, we can see there's many saintly people who come to give a transcendental knowledge and give these pure teachings. And also there are others who are stuck in this material existence, but by meeting that elevated person from transcendental world who also embrace and pick up the teachings, and they become purified, are becoming purified and elevated, and they can transcend as well and make their destination a spiritual world. So they also can be a spiritual master. So we read that, even doesn't matter what is the material condition the person is coming from, whether it's materially super successful, or, it is mentioned, a person may be coming from a family of dog eaters. Like one may have the most, unfortunate background in some, whether in terms of being very poor, or whether in terms of even like being very, very cruel or very bad person. There's many examples in the scripture how people from the horrendous backgrounds in the many traditions of the world as well, from some very, very bad backgrounds, become saintly. So there are many in in tradition of India and Christianity and many other, how people from very, very unfortunate backgrounds becoming very, very pure and saintly people. by coming in touch with the pure teachings and transforming their existence by the mercy of God and by the mercy of other spiritual teacher and spiritual master or saintly person, either directly or by somebody who you know, if somebody descends from spiritual world, that not necessarily you have to physically meet them, but you can come in a form of their teachings and the people who represent those teachings as well. So then from that position of purity and that position of what happens with the purity, one becomes transparent via medium for the spiritual world. So the spiritual world and experience of God and Krishna can manifest in the heart, or will 100% manifest in the heart of one who has developed love for God and developed that purity, that presence of the Lord would manifest. And by coming in touch with such a person, then that elevates those who come in touch. So I don't know whether that answers your question. Anybody else has got some question? Another question or a challenge? Yes.
Question though. So, if the law of karma is so complicated, made such a law, would it not have been helpful or better say if the law was simple and somewhat easy for us to understand? Then we could have saved ourselves from a lot of misguidance or say wrongdoings and actually serve the purpose or experience higher joy.
Thank you. Is your question? Is it your own question or somebody asking online? All right. So this is a very, very good question. Thank you. Why the law is so complicated? Actually, it's not Krishna who made the law complicated, but we made this law very complicated by having very complex desires and very complex states of consciousness. We have complicated the whole thing, because even if you just walk on the street, go to the city center and walk, from one side, like Glasgow, Buchanan Street, you go from one side of Buchanan Street, or let's say Oxford Street in London, because everybody knows Oxford Street. If you go from one side of Oxford Street to the other side of Oxford Street, you're gonna see people driving this car, wearing such and such clothes, such and such glasses, such and such phone and watch, and looking, happy, miserable, etc. You just walk on the street, just on a material level, you're gonna generate in 10 minutes that you're walking on Oxford Street, you can generate 1,000 on your wish list. I want this, I want this, I want this. Oh, look at these new glasses. Oh, this is new fashionable clothing. This new car, this new phone. The list goes on and on and on. This is just a 10 minutes. So because we have this very, very complex, this is just on material level, but, in terms of relationships, in terms of interactions, in terms of also, this kind of things, it gets extremely complex to facilitate. I mean, whoever has got a child, they can tell you, because you are acting, we're speaking about God and law of karma. If you have a kid, I think Katarina, she's got a child, to facilitate a desire of a child, it's a very, very complex situation, isn't it? Like, they want, the child is growing up, running around. I want this, I want that, I want the third thing. I don't want this. Like yesterday, we heard this small girl. She said, "Stop it! I don't want this. I want this. I don't want that way. I want this way." So it can be very, very complicated to facilitate a desire of a child. So therefore, the law becomes very, very complicated. And you can see as well in the law system as well, you can think, okay, why not just to simplify the law system? Okay, there's the people who do good, they are getting the good thing, and the people who are doing bad, they're doing bad thing. You can see law is so extremely complex. because there is so many nuances, and this way and that way and a third way, and there's a new ways are coming out, and the new things are coming out. It becomes extremely the legal system. It becomes like a super complicated and is always expanding with the new cases, and the human beings invent more and more weird ways of doing things, like online and in various types economical situations and etc. Sometimes there is nothing in the law, to to address the problem. So that's how the law of karma becomes so complex, so complicated, because we become so complicated. Thank you. So I'll stop here. We'll run out of time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande.
Prabhu ki